And it's one thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. And I just want to start, the main purpose of this teaching and the internship is to give you permission to make the main goal of your life and the main pursuit of your life to know Jesus and to encounter how he feels about you. I mean, that's the whole, really the reason that you're here and alive while your 2 feet are on the planet is to know him, right? We were all created for that. So with that, I wanted to just pray. Lord, I ask right now, Lord, that you would speak through me. I ask that you would speak to me. I ask, Lord, that out of my mouth, Lord, would come revelation and wisdom. But Father, I'm asking that you would cause this Bible verse, Psalms 27:4, I'm asking that it would be like an arrow shot to the deepest place of our hearts. That you would mark us, Lord, with what you gave David, with what you gave Mary, Lord, and Anna and Simeon, Lord, and all the others. Lord, I'm asking that you would give to us what you gave to them. And I pray, God, anything that you've given to me, Lord, I give, Lord, to my friends today. Anything in the Spirit, Lord, anything that we've fought for together, Lord, I give freely, Lord, as I've received. And so I'm asking right now that you would cause us to learn from you. But I'm asking, Lord, for that burden of God, that we would choose to set our face like flint towards you the rest of our days here. That we would live like today is our last day. Help us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. So I wanted to start with my story. For me, it all started back in second grade when I came home one day to my dad. And every single one of us, Proverbs 19:22 says, the desires of our heart is for unfailing love. And so the day I was born, the day you were born, that was the desire of our heart, is to know and experience what unfailing love is. Okay? And so I was born into that, born into sin, all this stuff. But in second grade, I came home to my dad, and my nanny would pick us up from school, and she'd bring us home, and my family was this Christian family that went to church on Sundays. We prayed before dinner. But this specific day, I came home to my dad, and it was scary. It was just a scary atmosphere to come home to. This day, I felt courageous, and I went up and asked my dad, "Hey, Dad, how's your day going?" He was watching TV. And he looked at me, and he said, "Good. Now go grab me a beer." So I went to the fridge, grabbed him a beer, came back to him. He said, "Good. Now go grab the pole." And so the pole was someplace in our family where we got whipped. And so it was often occurrence that I'd be going to the pole not knowing why I'm in trouble, or why I'm going there, or why my dad's wanting me to, why I'm getting punished. And so this specific day, I was going to the pole, and he whipped me. Again, I didn't know why I was getting whipped. And then he put the beer bottle back in my face. He says, "Now go put this back in the fridge. Close the door to the fridge, open the fridge back up, grab it, bring it back to me. You have 3 seconds. For every second you're late is 3 more lashings." And so I grabbed it and I ran. And did the whole thing. I was 5 seconds. Okay, so that was 6 lashings. And then I ran again. I was maybe 6 seconds that time. Ran again, it was 5 seconds. And so it got to this point where he just got tired of whipping me. So he sent me to my room for 3 hours and said, "Josh, sit crisscross applesauce on the bed. Look at this spot on the wall. You can't have your lights on. If I come up and find that your lights are on and you're not sitting crisscross applesauce, or you're not looking at that point on the wall, you're in trouble." When my dad said anything, it was just whatever he said, we did, and we tried to do it to the best of our ability. And so 3 hours later, he calls on the intercom. We had an intercom system in our house. And he says, "Get downstairs, it's time for dinner. You have 5 seconds." And so I woke up from the little daze I was in. I fell flat on my face. I lost all my feeling in my legs. I couldn't get back up for about a minute. It took about a minute to get feeling back in my legs. And so I start wobbling down the stairs, and he's just at the bottom of the stairs, face is bright red. And I knew I was just going to get it again. And so I got it again until he was tired. And then we all sat around the dinner table, and I have 2 younger brothers and an older sister. And we sat around the dinner table. My mom's there, and she's this sweet lady that kind of keeps the peace in my family. And she says the prayer, and we all just start eating. And it's kind of quiet. Oftentimes it's just quiet around the table. We don't really know what to say or what not to say, or we don't know if we're going to get in trouble or not, depending on what we say or don't say. And so we're eating spaghetti that night. Is my favorite, my mom's spaghetti. And we're just kind of, all you kind of hear is just the forks hitting the plates, and then my dad breaks the silence and he says, "Kids, do you know why I do what I do?" And I looked at it, I said, no, Dad, why do you do it? And he looked at me, and he looked at the rest of my siblings and said, "I do it because the Bible tells me to spare the rod or spoil the child." And I remember in that moment, that longing in my heart for love was shattered. And I knew I knew any form of love I was going to get from my dad, I wasn't going to find it there. And now it was any love that I thought maybe God had towards me, not there. And so I remember saying in my heart, if I can't be good, then I might as well be bad. And I went rebellious mode. Rebellious, is that a word? Yeah, rebellious. Yeah. And so I just went on a pilgrimage in my heart, and I went searching for love. I went searching for this one thing that my soul was created for, and it was love. It was to know God ultimately, right? But I went and tried to find it through everything else, through this, that, and the other thing. I tried to find it through girls, and this is second grade, remind you. So all the distance between second grade and eighth grade, I got kicked out of 3 schools, suspended 12 times, about 12 times, I forget exactly, by the time I was an 8th grader. And so between those, I think it's 6 years, right? Second grade to the 8th grade. It's good math, Josh, amen.
Yes.
I got kicked out of the things, and it was just for bullying, vandalizing, cussing teachers out, all the things, right? And I got into high school, and I met this girl, and I'd been to all the feeder schools I went to Del Oro High School, so I was pretty popular freshman year because I knew everybody. I met this girl, and again, that thing in my heart was like, man, if I can just have her, life will be all right. It'll work out. And so I went and pursued her, got the girl. We started dating, terrible relationship. Again, I placed my whole identity in her. So if she was treating me a certain way, then I'm doing good. If she wasn't, then I'm abusing her every way you can think of. And 10 months into that relationship, she cheats on me with a good friend of mine. Again, shatters my heart. And so now I'm like, okay, God's not going to do it. My dad's not going to do it. Girls aren't going to do it. The one thing I hadn't fully dove headfirst into was drugs. I was smoking and drinking. That's just kind of what you do in high school. But that was the one thing. And so I said, you know what? Screw relationships, screw people, screw God. I'm going to go head first and just do drugs, because drugs don't yell at me. They don't punish me. They don't cheat on me. They don't, finish the list. And so I started popping pills. And so now it went from, because I was already partying, doing all that stuff. Now it went from that to now me and my friends would go to Walmart, and we'd steal as many handles as we could grab. And we'd grab all the triple C, it's this DXM is the drug. And we would go to my friend's house, and we'd start popping pills, and then we'd start drinking and smoking, and the first one that passed out won, basically. And that was my whole sophomore, junior year of high school. And in that whole journey, I started to deal drugs because I needed to afford the addiction that I now created for myself. So I became a drug dealer at Del Oro, doing drugs. That's all I'm doing. I mean, I started the morning, waking up, smoking. I had a bottle about the ice, about that size, vodka for lunch. And so I'd go into 4th block just drunk, and then I would smoke before bed. And so I was just constantly intoxicated every day, dealing drugs. And now I'm trying to get people hooked on drugs so they'd buy from me so I can make money, the whole 9 yards. Just broken inside, right? Broken. And I was a monster. I mean, all I did was steal from people, hurt people, every way you can think of. And I came home to my mom 6 years ago, just a couple weeks ago, and I went up to her and I said, Mom, if life's going to keep being like this, I'm done. I'm going to kill myself. And my mom's this sweet lady. She's about 100 pounds. Are you about 100 pounds? She's about Alexis size. Sweet lady, just faithful in prayer. Always prayed for me. And My dad wasn't home. He was down in the Bay Area on a job, and I come home, she's cooking dinner in the kitchen, and I went up to her and said this. I said, Mom, if life's gonna be like this, I mean, I'm just depressed, I hate my life, I hate myself. And I went to my room to I was just weeping, and she starts weeping, and I went up to my room to try to figure out how I was gonna do this, how I was gonna kill myself. And she comes in, again, we're just crying. It's a mess. It's the lowest point in my entire life. It was that day, 6 years ago. And she looked at me and she said, Joshua, you need to think about what you're doing. And I said, Mom, I've already thought it through. I'm better off, and everybody else around me is better off if I'm dead. And she said, well, Josh, can I pray for you? And I remember thinking, yeah, Mom, you pray for me. And then I'm going to leave. And if there's a heaven, I'll see you there, but if not, have a good rest of your life. And she just cried out like a mom would. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she cried out and asked God to show me what my life was worth and to take the pain in my heart. And that was the moment that I met the man that I'd been searching for my whole life, 17 years. I met him face to face that day, and he spoke to me and he said, son, if you don't want your life, give it to me. And I said, God, if you can use my life for good, you can have every part of it. And just this love filled my heart that day. And I remember feeling like, God, this is what I'm searching for, this one thing. Nothing else satisfied. I tried everything else in the books. Nothing else, but he filled my heart that day, and it was that whole concept of, I have it right here, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid, and for joy over it he goes and sells all that he has to buy the field. Jesus was the field. And I found him on that day, and I said, God, if you can use my life for good, I'll give you everything. And so he encountered me, and he spoke to me, and son, if you don't want your life, give it to me. I gave my whole life to him. And I sold everything. I went and I gave up all my friends. I gave up the drugs. I gave up, and it was a process. I'm not going to sit here and say it was all happened in that moment. He's been doing surgery ever since. But I fell in love with that man, and he changed everything for me. And ever since that moment, I've been searching after this one thing. So for 17 years, I tried to find it through everything else. Now I've found it, and now I've given my whole life to searching him out and to know him to the depths that I can know him. Because nothing else is worth anything to me. And then I got caught up in ministry for a second, and I started placing my identity in that, and he called me out of that. And it's been a journey. I have so many stories that I can share, but it's been a journey up to this point, but it's just consumed my life. I believe this verse, I didn't actually know it until I came here in the prayer room and saw it on the wall. But as soon as I read it, I was like, that's what God marked me with that moment. It was this one thing, desire that I won't negotiate with anybody. I won't negotiate with you. I won't negotiate with my friends. I won't negotiate with the devil, my flesh. It's like, it's over. It's one thing, and that's the only thing I care about. That's the only thing I'm going to seek for the rest of my days. No, and no girl, no whatever is going to keep me from doing that. And I've learned the devil can't even stop me from doing that. You know, it's the whole thing of like, nothing can separate us from the love of God. When I found that love, man, I gripped on so hard, and I've never let go. And there's been times I've wanted to quit. There's been many times I've wanted to quit. But it's like I look back and there is nothing to go back to. I've burned everything. Walked away from everything. And so I turn back and it's just a wasteland. I'm like, okay, I can't. I'm going to can't. And so it's just been this journey of me of just letting God mark me again with this desire to love him, this desire to know him. And that's why I started reading Bible verses. I was raised my whole life that it was all about saying a prayer to go to heaven, and you were going to sit on a cloud for the rest of your life and have a harp or something. But when I started to read verses like you mentioned it tonight on your prayer, John chapter 17 verses 3, he says eternal life is to know him. Yeah. Too, when I read that, it was over again. It just keeps getting more over for me and the devil and everything. It was like, no way, I can know this love. I can actually have a relationship with him. And so from there on out, I just started to seek after the Lord. I'd go to these places I used to smoke. I used to be really in, or I still am, really into scenery and just lookouts and nature and all this stuff. So I'd go to the places by the river. I'd go to places where I'd look out and used to smoke a joint, and I'd open up my Bible and I'd just start to read. And I would read verses like Matthew 6:6, where he said, when you pray, go into your room and close the door and pray to your Father who's unseen. And he who sees what's done in secret will reward you. And I'm like, you're kidding. You're kidding. And I'm out there on the lookout. God, is it cool if I just sit here? We can talk here? Or do you need a door to be involved? And he's like, you're good, man. The whole point is just do it in secret, you know? And so I would just open my Bible and I would just sit up on those hilltops and I would just cry and cry, and he would just encounter me with his word. And then I would read things like, these signs will follow them that believe. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Greater works will you do than I? Let me try this out. And so I got saved junior year, at the end of junior year, so I got to live my whole senior life as a fully born-again believer. And again, I went from drug dealing, I went from dope to hope dealing. You know? As cheesy as it is, man, that's what it is. I just started just passing out hope to every person that would listen to me. And I'd be in my classroom, I walked around with my Bible, it was just this little Bible, I call it my sword. And I wouldn't go anywhere without that little Bible, man. Go into class, and my friends would make fun of me, like, oh, you're the Jesus guy. And I'm like, yeah, dude, he loves you, man, so much. And I'd go and I'd hand out Chick-fil-A sandwiches to the people that were sitting alone. I'd just sit with them, you know, and talk to them about them and whatever they wanted to talk about. And then oftentimes, though, people leaned in and they were like, what the blank is wrong with you, man? There's something different. Because I remember the guy that used to steal from me, bully me, all the things, and now you're sitting with me and you're giving me a Chick-fil-A sandwich. And I didn't have any explanation. I just there's this man that I encountered. His name is Jesus. Would you like to know him? It was simple for me. It was never this complicated thing where I had to go through all these steps. It was like, I met this man that I'd been searching for my whole life, that drugs didn't satisfy, sex didn't satisfy, porn didn't satisfy, anything else didn't satisfy. He filled my heart, and I just love him now. And you have to know him, because if you don't, you're not doing very good in life. And so that's what I would do. And people, again, like I would say about half of people, they would be like, what the blank is wrong with you? Half of them, after I told them it was Jesus, would turn away and say, I'm not into that religious stuff. I would tell him, man, straight out, this ain't no religion, man. This is a man that's in love with you. Then half of them would lean in. And many of my drug dealer buddies, they got saved, and they started coming with me to church, and we do Bible studies together. And just fun stuff, man. But again, this one thing desire just pierced my heart, and nothing else did it for me anymore. And so I've been on this pilgrimage ever since, and hopefully for the rest of my life. I say hopefully, it's a done deal, definitely. But, yeah, that's what I'll be doing. So, and I read this verse, it's letter C right here. It's the last sentence. It's the whole story of the woman that comes in and pours her alabaster jar on Jesus. And Jesus says, I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed. And I was just thinking about that the other week, and I was like, I believe the reason God said that is it's the only proper response for someone that's received the gospel. Someone that's received Jesus. It's the only proper response to sell everything that you have to buy the field. I don't understand any other way to do it. I've watched it for the first 17 years of my life, going to church on Sunday, praying the prayer. But to know him, as soon as you encounter, like, you guys aren't going to get this just by me sharing at you for 45 minutes, whatever. Like, this is an encounter that you need to have with the most beautiful man. And many of you have had that encounter. Like, I'm not preaching to a bunch of people that are just trying to get away with sin. Like, you guys are in love with Jesus. And I love it. That's what I love about this place, man, is it attracts genuine lovers. Because there's no fluff to it. And it's incredible. But I just believe that is the proper response, is to pour our lives at the feet of Jesus. And I was thinking, at the end of the age, like I used to be really into, hey, say this prayer to go to heaven and you'll be saved. And I got a bunch of people to say the prayer. But I'm really, like, at the end of the age, ultimately this is all going to two worship movements. The Antichrist and Jesus. two worship movements coming to a full head, and the war is over the affections of the human heart. And so I'm no longer going out in the world trying to get people to say a prayer. I'm like, you need to know Jesus. I'm like a neon sign, I like to say. I'm just pointing to that dude. Just go get with him, man. That's the only way. And that's what I love about this, because discipleship, it so revolves around going and talking to Jesus. Yeah. It's less about you coming to me with your issues and me trying to have some psychology, trying to help you, which there's a place for that, because we need that sometimes. But it's all about, no, go talk to him, man. And it actually helps a lot of pastors, man, because we take on way too much sometimes, when really Jesus is the one that can hold the burden, right? I'm on a trail, but anyway, this is the proper response, is laying our life at the feet of Jesus and saying, God, you can have everything. And from that place, we minister. We love God, we love people. So then down to point 3, we're moving, dude. Story when 2020 hit. So again, there was there's 4 years of just loving God, I get in this relationship with this girlfriend. God really did it. It was a really God thing. That's why I thought we were going to get married. We loved each other. We wanted to get married. We dated for about a year and a half. And 2020 hit. And right before the pandemic hit, so around January, February time, I was on a walk with the Lord one day, and he spoke this thing to me, and he says, do you trust me? And you know those things God speaks to you, and you're like, I know where this is going. And it was that thing, I knew it was another altar moment in my life, where it was that Isaac and Abraham moment, where he was going to ask for that love, because and it's always unto taking us deeper into the heart of God. And there's been many things, even in your own life, I bet you've had to lay down to even do the internship, because it's costly to follow Jesus. But when you've sold everything, you have nothing to hold on to. Like when I gave my life, I don't hold the right to hold on to anything that's not created. And what I've learned is you're only giving up everything that you were never created to be in the first place.
That's good.
Like that's the reality of it, right? That's all we're giving up, is everything, and we just have to learn to trust. I love what Brenda was talking about. There's such a battle of who do we trust, right? All you're doing is giving up everything you're never created to be, everything that you think you wanted, everything you think you have. It's not yours. He paid a big price to get you into the family. Oh, I love it. And so, as I'm on this walk, he says, do you trust me? And I knew he was asking for a girlfriend that I wanted to get married to. And so I wrestled with him a little bit, like, man, really? And I was just a mess on the walk. It's over here off next to Royer Park, if you were wondering. And I'm just walking in. He says, do you trust me? And again, pandemic hadn't hit. I don't know what's about to hit the earth, right? But it's, do you trust me? Okay, God, I trust you. And so it was, I didn't just go there and, I talked with counsel about it, and it was a whole thing. But ultimately we broke up. However, she actually introduced me to this place. It's a beautiful thing. And so right when we broke up, the pandemic hit. Nobody was allowed to go anywhere, right? Terrible time to have a heartbreak. Worst thing, right? So now I'm stuck in my room for about 12 hours a day with a broken heart. And that's what I did for that whole 6 months to a year. And I was just stuck in my room. The cool thing is this was the only place that was open. Everything else shut down, but we were like, hey, let's come and pray. And so I started coming here, and soon after that, I started to ask, because I wanted to get married, right? So I started to ask the Lord, okay, what's next in my life? Because that was what was next in my mind in my life. But now that's out of the way. Now, like, Lord, do you want me to go to school? Do you want me to go to Dallas? I was trying to run from my pain, go to Dallas. But one thing that happened throughout the 5 years up to this point, the Lord had given me so many just prophetic things about being a messenger for a whole generation. Like that's what he's called me to do. I know it is. This John the Baptist thing, he's just been speaking it ever since I got saved. And so he says, he comes to me in my room. I'm on my, praying and all. I've been praying for about 2 weeks at this point. What do you want me to do next? It just seems like my life is just a halt. The whole world was a halt. What do you want me to do next? You want me to sign up for school, move to Dallas? I was just looking for the next thing that I needed to put my hands to. And he gives me this vision. And it was me sitting in that room praying. And he's like, Josh, I'm not raising you up as one with a theology degree, but I'm raising you up in the spirit of Acts chapter 4, verses 13. And that's where Peter and John were preaching, and the synagogue leaders and the citizens looked at them and they realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, but they couldn't deny that they had been with Jesus. He started to speak to me. He's like, will you give your 20s to sitting at my feet, talking to me, getting to know me? Because, Josh, I want to put a spirit of revelation on you in a deeper way than you think you have right now. I want you to be rooted and established in knowing my heart for you. Because at the end of the age, where this is going, if you can't move angels and demons out of the way, you won't be of much use. So get to fasting. And then Jim and all them call it 40-day fast. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 1 day a week for 40 days. And that was a lot for me at the time. And he just so delights in our hunger. But then quickly after, I come to Jim and Zach, and there was probably like 4 or 5 of us, 6 of us running around this place at the time. I'm like, hey, do you guys do an internship? And they look at me and they're like, no. I'm like, okay, no worries. I'm just going to keep showing up, praying with you guys. So I just keep praying, you know, when they're open and stuff. And then a week later, they come up to me and they're like, Josh, we'll do an internship just for you. And I'm like, okay. We'll put together classes. We can get in there and pray together. I'm like, yeah, let's do it, you know. And then we called the 10 other people that were in the room around at that time, and they all hopped in too. So I think there was 12 of us, 10 of us? 10. There's 10 of us, the first internship. And that's kind of how this whole thing kind of started rolling. It was just kind of a cool thing. And the internship was so cool for me. Again, it was just something that I could just give myself to. It just helped me in my pursuit of this one thing that was already on my heart. And now I walked into a place and everybody else wants to do the same thing that I've wanted to do for the last 5 years, right? So it was incredible. During the internship, he spoke to me and he says, Josh, you've been a Martha, right? You know the story of Mary and Martha? Yeah. You've been a Martha with Mary moments. But Josh, will you be a Mary with Martha moments? For your 20s, right? He was asking for my 20s. And again, I'm like, nah, I like the whole preaching. And I was actually working with Caleb at the time. We were doing a high school ministry. And incredible season. But he started to, again, it just started to pull my heart towards just sitting at his feet and loving him. And I like my desires started to shift. I'm like, man, like, just even as I was on high schools, I was like, man, like I really just want to pray right now. I want to know God. I want to, you know, just keep, it was just that season where he was just calling me. He was like, come away with me to a secret place. And so soon after that, man, I started to fully shift. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And that's basically the story. And I guess I kind of just wanted to end it. It's less of a teaching and more of a story thing. I guess go back to point A on the thing. The main purpose of the teaching is to give you permission to make the goal and pursuit of your life to know and experience the heart of God. So as you've been here for the last 3 months, you've learned some things, you haven't learned some things, still struggling with some things, whatever. But you've experienced what it's like to live a life in the prayer room. Yeah. And I'm that guy that was, I can love Jesus outside of this place, right? And I'm sure all of you guys can too. That's why you're here, right? But there's something special when I found about coming here. I'm like, man, people do this and we can do this together. And it was God's invitation to me to actually come deeper into the place of prayer, because there is attacks and things that you face as you go deeper in the love and heart of God that you actually can't hold and sustain with a prayer life on your own. Because there's things that God works in you through humility. He says in Ephesians chapter 3, verses 16 and 19, that we actually grasp the love of God with all the saints. Yeah. The heights, the widths, the lengths, and the depths, right? And so there's something that, as I started to get around people, what Irina carries, what David carries, what all you guys carry, it actually allows me to see the love of God in a totally different way than I've seen it before. And so I'm like, this is brilliant. And then we mess up and we screw up and we repent to each other, and it's like there's this humility that's being formed Because we show up to that room and there's not any bells and whistles. There's a couple of them. But you show up to that room and you're not really, I mean, it wears off pretty quick. I'm going to say 6 months before your whole bravado, the cool prayers you think you got, I mean, everything starts wearing off about 6 months into the thing. And you're like, man, I don't really have a whole lot to pray. I don't really have a whole lot going on with God that I thought I did. And you really start to get to this place of desperation again. And for me, it's just been a constant journey of, okay, I'm desperate again. It's like every other week. It's like, but it's just, but I love, there's such a strength with going in and praying and having a weekly fast day and all the things that we've been doing, right? And so this place is here for you. It's to serve you, to say, hey, God, I want to give you however much time in my life. It doesn't have to be your 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s, whatever it is. It could be a couple months. It could be 6 months. But I want to challenge you to give yourself to something. It doesn't have to be here even. But as we're exiting out of the internship, give yourself to something where you're accountable to it. Because if you're not, you won't do it. It's simple. It really is. Like if I wasn't with you, I couldn't sustain the life that God's given to me as far as holding what he's given me to hold now. I couldn't do it. I can't go back to just praying on my own now. I love it. And what you find is that as you pray with people more, you start to need the alone time more.
Yeah.
And so it's this deep thing calling to the deep things of God, and he continues to woo us in each moment. There's certain seasons where I need the prayer room. I need to up my hours in the prayer room because I know that there's just something. And then there's other seasons where I know I need to pull back from here and get alone in secret and talk to him about some things. And so it's this dance that we're constantly playing tension, right? But there's such an importance as I read the scriptures and I realize what this thing is. I mean, David's cry was one thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek, that I would dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. It was David's longing to be in the house of the Lord. It was marked on his heart. It was Mary's cry to just dump it all at his feet. I mean, I just imagine seeing the Lamb of God walking on the earth. And she's like, I have to give him everything. I felt like that, man, when he encountered me. I have to give him. There's no other option. There's nothing else. It's just everything. And so as we're calling you this, as the internship ends, I'm kind of wrapping it up, volunteer staff, all this stuff. As the internship ends, you'll realize that sin is right there crouching at your door. Yeah. Because what God's done throughout the last 3 months is he's expanded your heart through prayers, through fasting, through being in an anointed atmosphere where the presence of God is. He's expanded your capacity to receive him and to dwell with him, really. So as soon as you go without something in your appetite, you automatically, by nature, you fill it with something else. Right? And I just want to warn you guys. I want to be a good shepherd and warn you guys, the wolves are right next to you. All right? They are right there to shred you to pieces. Really. And I say that with a smile on my face, but there's sobriety behind that. And I want to encourage you to make something, a sacred trust. That's why we do a thing called volunteer staff here, is to give you an opportunity to stay accountable. And so as soon as I got out of the internship, I already gave my 20s to the thing, so nothing really changed for me. So I was like, I'm just going to sign up for sets. I'm going to show up 6 a.m. on that set. I know Jim's going to be there. He's going to be there with his guitar or on the piano or whatever. And I'm going to show up and I'm just going to pray with him for the hour, however long I was there that day. But it gave me some sense of accountability that I'm going to show up and I'm going to be there, because most days I don't want to get up at 4:54 and do that, right? I know, I'm weird. But, so that's kind of what we wanted to end with. It honestly, it goes right back to the first teaching that I taught. You got to get a vision for your life. Where do you want to be when you're 60? What's the kind of man or woman you want to be? Do you want to be a man after God's heart? Do you want to be a David? Do you want to be a Mary? Do you want to be an Anna? Or do you want to be a Joe Schmo? You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. God has assignments for all of us, all right? Some of us are Marthas in the room. And he's like, hey, just give me a season to be a Mary, right? And you're going to go and God's going to launch you into ministry. And that's great. You need to be obedient to the Lord, right? There's that Song of Psalms thing where the Shulamite was sitting there and he comes knocking on our door and says, hey, let's go leap over the mountains. He's saying, hey, enough sitting, let's go, all right? So there's seasons that we go through as believers where God invites us to get up out of the seat and go and run with him. And I want to validate that. It's very real, and God has that for us. But for some, I guess I'm just feeling accountable to raising the flags, what we're doing here, and saying, give yourself to this lifestyle of prayer, fasting, and doing it with each other. And getting that Psalms chapter 27:4. I was thinking about getting it tattooed somewhere. I wasn't sure, but you don't have to do that. But again, I'm just kind of wrapping it up. I'm figuring out how to do this. So again, it starts out, this is what I taught you the first day. What's your vision? Without vision, you're going to perish. It's just biblical. Don't try to run from that because you'll fall and you'll perish. So get a vision. Come up with action steps. Okay, vision. God, I want to be a man after your heart. I want to give you everything. All right. You got a prayer room. You got people to be accountable to. Here's some action steps. Sign up for a couple sets. I mean, I think volunteer staff, it's 4 hours a week you got to just be accountable to, which is, you got more than, in you than that. Sorry, I'm trying to be like Jim. He's so good at, have you noticed that? Jim is so good at like comforting you on the other side. I just shoot it to you straight and kind of hope that you understand I don't offend people. But Jim, man, I really look up to him in that area. Put it in your schedule and don't negotiate on it. So get a vision, get action steps, put it in your schedule, don't negotiate with anybody on it. And then right there, see, it's desperation for God. Ask him to wound you with spiritual hunger. So I'm going to pray for you now. I'm going to ask for the wounding of God. That hurts sometimes. The whole wounding process for me was when he asked me to walk away from the girlfriend. That wounded me deeply, and that caused me to tether myself to him. So, Father, I thank you for the word of Psalms 27:4. I thank you for David's cry. I thank you for his life lived in secret to you. And I'm asking right now, Father, over each person in this room, Lord, after 3 months, I'm asking right now, Lord, that you would pierce each and every one of our hearts with Psalms chapter 27, verses 4, Lord, that you would pierce us with that. Sell everything so that you can buy the field. Father, make it the primary occupation of our lives, that we would live our life poured out at your feet, loving you with everything that we know how to love you with. And so, Father, I tear down, Lord, every idol, every form of distraction, Lord, everything, Lord, that would even sound good to us, but that it would be counterfeit. I ask that you would expose it. Everything that looks good, Lord, but it's counterfeit. I ask that you'd expose the darkness. Lord, that we would run and stay tethered to you as we finish out the internship. Lord, I pray that what was deposited in each one of us throughout the last 3 months, Lord, that you would seal it now. In the name of Jesus. Amen.